Amongst comic fans, there exists one question which rises above all others. Boxers or briefs? No, not those. These.
The shorts add a lot, don't they?
This is an age-old debate that takes many forms. Be it the way people argue over whether or not Wonder Woman should wear pants, the New 52 erasing the super undies from continuity, only for the Roaring Rebirth era to bring them back to mass acclaim. There's a lot of history and context to this weird little angle of superhero costume design. So let's try to break down the arguments around this age-old debate and see if we can get to the bottom of the superhero underwear iceberg. I said bottom. So starting off, there's this constant need to always modernize and update superheroes. With some of these characters hailing from as far back as the 1940s, that kind of makes sense. And back in the early 2000s, the way they did that was by giving everyone leather suits and realistic armor. So as the years went on, executives thought the move to make Superman hip and cool and modern was to ditch the underwear on the outside. But at that point, the underwear on the outside had become so much of a cultural in-joke that there was an entire children's book series that was written about them. That's right, Superman's underwear were so iconic that they inspired their own book series and movie. So when the publisher decided to take them away, it kind of makes sense that fans were upset. In 2011, DC rebooted its continuity and tried to update all the heroes' costumes to match more modern standards, which meant making every costume over-designed with all these ugly Sharpie lines, and editorial stripping away our heroes' iconic undies. Batman, Superman, Martian Manhunter, all casualties of the New 52's nudification of our superheroes' super crotches. Did I really write that? But not to worry, because it wouldn't be long before they brought back Superman's underwear in 2016. And after that, fans were happy. Just kidding. Comic fans are never happy with anything until it's in retrospect. I bet someone out there has already been typing out an angry comment within the first 3 minutes of the video. But regardless, Superman getting the underwear back proved that for better or for worse, that the red briefs on the outside were here to stay from here on out. Moving on to the next point in the iceberg, here's some cultural context to why all the superheroes wore these. Back in the old days, circus strongmen, boxers, and wrestlers would all wear these belted briefs that were similar to what Superman was drawn wearing in his first appearance. And for comparison, in the modern day, wrestler panties are still an iconic part of the wardrobe.
You're going nowhere. I got you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of heat time. Voices in my head, they counsel me, they understand.
The iconography of circus strongmen and wrestlers was something that Superman borrowed from to convey a sense of familiarity to the audiences of the 1930s. But it also brings me to another topic that's a little bit lower on the iceberg. Trunks versus briefs. This one's pretty simple. Characters like Batman and Superman have both been depicted with briefs and with trunks over the years, though the briefs tend to be a little bit more prominent. But back around the time that people were arguing that Superman should get rid of the underwear on the outside, giving Superman trunks was something that was offered as an alternative. It even had canon context to back it up, because some artists had always viewed them as trunks. I don't really have a horse in this race, I just thought it was a neat little footnote. I absolutely do think Superman should have underwear on the outside, but I don't really care if they're boxers or briefs. Do you have a preference? Let me know in the comments down below if you do. I'm just dying to know. Okay, so the next one's a little bit weird. Let's talk about the real-life superpowers of Magic Mormon underwear. Magic Mormon underwear, or MMUs, are worn by real-life members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, or Mormons. They believe their underwear provides them with a layer of protection that wards off demons and keeps them safe from the evils of the secular world. That doesn't really connect to anything else in the iceberg, I just thought it was vaguely similar enough to superhero costumes that it was kind of funny. Moving on, since we're talking about outdated views on what women should and shouldn't wear, let's talk about Wonder Woman and the war on pants. Prior to the New 52, around 2010, Wonder Woman debuted a new costume that had pants and a leather jacket. The costume got to be a fan favorite, but it wasn't even the first time that Wonder Woman had a redesign with pants. But a year after that, the New 52 reboot happened. And when it was announced, we got this concept art of Wonder Woman who was wearing pants. But then when the New 52 books were released in September, Wonder Woman had been completely redesigned without them. While characters like Batman and Superman lost the undies in an attempt to modernize them, ironically enough, Wonder Woman was forced back into them. Nowadays, the skirt tends to be the default on account of the movies, but I think Wonder Woman with the classic pants and just the tube top would look great and makes a lot of sense. Maybe if they're not pants, they could be armor, kind of like the Rebirth design, but one way or another, I really like the original New 52 design. Wonder Woman is literally the only character that looked better with just pants. But I digress. So why are the underwear so important that it warrants an entire video on the subject? Good question, complicated answer. But the answer isn't going to be found in the lore of the comic books. It can only be explained in the meta.
Hey kids, you want to hear about color theory?
Ever notice how there are a ton of heroes and villains with a green and purple color scheme? How about red and blue? Well, that's not a coincidence. That's color theory. And in the world of graphic design, when they're making these costumes, they draw the underwear on the outside to break up the uniformity of the costume and make the character stick out more on the page. That's what gives them main character energy. And when you're using contrasting colors, typically the ones that are across from each other on the color wheel will make the others around it look brighter and more noticeable when placed next to each other. I'm sure you learned about complementary colors, monochromatic colors, analogous colors, whenever you took art in middle school. But the idea is that you use opposites to attract. Without the red underwear, Superman just kind of fades into the background of this old school comic panel. But then you add the red, and suddenly he's got main character energy. That's the real reason that superheroes wear underwear on the outside. But there's one more that I gotta talk about. It's an open secret that artists have known for years. And the truth is that all superheroes are drawn naked. Just like statues of Greek mythological figures. And then their clothes are rendered on top of them like body paint. Let me explain. When you're drawing a superhero, you draw them like you draw a nude figure. The outline of the body, then on top of that Barbie doll outline, you add on the details of the superhero costume. In the world of comic books, in the canon of the stories, these are just skin-tight bodysuits. But in the real world, skin-tight suits just wouldn't look near as good or near as consistent. So what that translates to is that artistic liberties are taken in order to give the world of comic books more expression. Like you see Deadpool's mask moving around like this in the movie, but obviously masks don't do that in real life. But in the movie, it helps the character show expression. Honestly, it really boils down to this one quote from Grant Morrison that I use over and over again in every single video. It's fiction. It's a comic book. It's artistic liberty. Just roll with it. Learn to have fun. So yes, superheroes are drawn naked, meaning they're drawn like nude figures. And that means that the clothes that they're wearing in book are drawn a lot closer to body paint than drawing traditional clothing. But when you're translating these concepts from medium to medium, sometimes you gotta figure out how to meet those two mediums in the middle. Sometimes that translates to tactical armor plating, sometimes it translates to the batsuit having nipples, which makes them sort of akin to Greek statues in a way. The knowledge that superheroes are drawn on page as nude figures was part of Schumacher's inspiration with the Batman Forever costumes. Everyone talks about the Bat Nipples, but what people fail to mention is the glorious, beautiful bat crotch. Batman's bulge is accentuated just as much as the nipples or the abs of the costume. And honestly, I think that design decision is really clever. But don't worry, we'll circle back around to the Bat costume's bat crotch later. So Schumacher decided to emphasize the groin and muscular tone of Batman's costume in order to play into the idea that superheroes are modern mythological figures like Greek gods, legendary figures of grandeur, gods and monsters living among mortal beings. He wanted Batman to feel literally statuesque, and for better or worse, he achieved it. But on the notion that all superheroes are drawn naked, let's talk about Milo Manara and the Hawkeye Initiative. In 2014, Marvel hired Italian erotic illustrator Milo Manara to do a Spider-Woman variant cover. Milo Manara was already a well-known name in the world of European comics, having worked on everything from horror comics to books like Heavy Metal and even softcore erotica. But Manara had also done work for DC and Marvel as well, having done illustrations for both X-Men and Sandman. But 2014 is around the time there started to be a big cultural uproar over how women are portrayed in media, with Tumblr being a big part of that surge. Tumblr had a large base of comic book fans and a large population of female users, leading to a bit of an outcry on the website over Milo Manara's Spider-Woman cover. A lot of people thought the cover was sexist and degrading to women, so as a result, the Hawkeye Initiative was born. The Hawkeye Initiative featured female characters from iconic covers and panels, redrawn with Hawkeye as the subject. That way they could use Hawkeye as an example of how ridiculous some of these poses were. The idea being that if you draw a male character in the same poses as a woman, it makes the character look kind of ridiculous. My personal feelings on the Hawkeye Initiative are mixed. On one hand, there was and still is a big problem with the double standard of how female characters are portrayed versus their male counterparts. But on the other hand, Marvel had literally hired a porn artist to do the cover, so of course it was going to come off sexual. And there were even cosplayers who went out of their way to prove that the pose wasn't unrealistic at all. Dedicated fans also found a Spider-Man cover where he was in nearly the exact same pose as Spider-Woman. But with that being said, I think the issue of women being over-sexualized in comics is completely valid. I also think the Milo Manara Spider-Woman cover was the wrong catalyst to spark that conversation. I don't really have a problem with the sexualization of superheroes in comic book media, but there's a time and a place for everything, right? And to take it a step further, comics have always had roots in kink. Cheesecake and beefcake art in comics have existed longer than comic book superheroes have. People were making Tijuana Bibles with Disney characters for years before Batman or Superman ever existed. And for as much flack as characters like Power Girl or Starfire get for showing too much skin, you also have characters like Hercules or He-Man, who both dress just as skimpy as the female characters. And consider Bruce Timm. His entire art style is inspired from Playboy comics back in the 50s. For better or worse, there's a direct through line between how Bruce Timm draws Wonder Woman and how Eric Sokol drew Playboy bunnies. Direct through line. One of Superman's co-creators even drew Pearl for erotic comics when he needed the money. And the creator of Wonder Woman was in a polygamous marriage, and he had all these themes of bondage inserted into a ton of the early Wonder Woman books. So like it or not, kink has always been in the DNA of superheroes as a genre. I'll agree that sometimes it pops up in the wrong place at the wrong time, but like I said earlier, I think there's a time and a place for everything. So maybe the compromise could work like this. A book with a more serious tone, like Tom King's Wonder Woman, or an event book like Night Terrors, should lean more towards realism than sensuality. But a book with a more comedic tone, like Harley Quinn, Power Girl, or Betty Page, those books should lean more into that beefcake cheesecake vibe. And if the issue is that only female characters are sexualized, maybe that means that on a book-by-book basis, we could play up the sexuality of the male characters too. You know, give us a little more beefcake, you know what I'm saying? A story with an exaggerated comedic tone should also have characters that have exaggerated features. But a story that's more grounded and serious should probably have art that matches that tone. And honestly, it's not even that much of a suggestion. Those are pretty much the rules that modern comics already follow when it comes to sexy art in the modern age. We don't get moments like Batman and Catwoman screwing on a roof in their costumes in serious books anymore. But we do get jokes about Batman not giving head in the Harley Quinn cartoon. There's this weird, delicate line that superhero media has to balance. Because on one hand, Harley Quinn makes a lot of money from horny, pervy nerds who saw her in Suicide Squad, then went out and bought a Bishojo statue of her after. But on the other hand, Harley Quinn is also a main character in a cartoon that they market towards children. So trying to find a balance and tiptoe that tightrope isn't always so easy. I don't really have any definitive opinions about it one way or another. I do like sexy art and I would like to see more of it, but on the other hand, we also need a better sense of balance in media and better representation for women. So how do we achieve that balance? By over-sexualizing the male characters more often, obviously. I'm only half kidding there. But like I said, for the third time now, there's a time and a place for everything. What do you think about the Spider-Woman cover? Do you have a favorite erotic superhero artist? Tracy Scott seems to have a lot of fans. Sunset Rider 7 too. Jesus, look how much money they make in a single month. Christ. So now that we covered everything else, we're finally down to the last tier in the superhero underwear iceberg. This is just a singular topic, but it's something I alluded to earlier, and I've wanted to talk about the entire video. So without further ado, let's talk about the Bat Bulge. Similar to the surface level topic of Superman's underwear, less people seem to argue over whether or not Batman should have them. Maybe that's because they're used to seeing Batman without them. After all, there hasn't been a single Batman movie where he's worn them since 1966. But a few of them wore something oddly similar. There exists an innovation inside of Batman's arsenal that can solely be attributed to the mind of Joel Schumacher. Something that Grant Morrison saw in DC's basement, dusted off, and then said,
"Has anyone seen this trash? Everyone put it aside. It's not so trashy after all."
Batman's jockstrap. It took a gay man to have the gumption to do it, and it took a non-binary person to dust that off and then reimagine it to its full potential. Altering just a few lines would exemplify the power and dominance of Batman's presence. But this hardened piece of equipment makes all the difference in Batman to me. The Batman Incorporated suit has been my favorite for a long time. It's really the best of both worlds for every Batsuit. You get both the oval logo, and you get a more contemporary, modernized take on the Batsuit without necessarily losing that silhouette iconography. And then you get the Batstrap replacing the underwear on the outside, which gives context and purpose to the Breeves, or serves as a great substitute for them. It just breaks up the uniformity, helping Batman adhere to that general comic book aesthetic. He stays recognizable, and something that was silly before is given a more serious nature and fully contextualized. It really is the best of both worlds. And it also keeps Batman's Batball safe. But beyond that, and hear me out here, I also just think there's an inherent sexual nature to Batman just like there is to Catwoman. Catwoman's goes without saying. She's a woman in a leather suit, you can see every curve on her body, and when you know there's only a thin layer of fabric between the outside world and everything underneath, it teases your imagination.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
Gets the people going.
And in the same way that Catwoman's costume accentuates her ass as her assets, a jockstrap increases the inherent sexuality of Batman as well. Having Batman's giant schwang in your face makes him that much more intimidating. While women's bodies are celebrated and often exaggerated in the world of comics, albeit, sometimes maybe a little bit too much, men's bodies are both embraced and exaggerated, but then castrated.
Hey, where's the beef?
Men get to be these muscular beefcakes, but then they're also basically Ken dolls.
I'm mentally ill and I'm on drugs.
Schumacher fixed it, and then Grant Morrison doubled down on it, and DC Editorial, being the superstitious and cowardly lot that they are, got rid of the Batstrap forever. Like the criminals, they are. To hammer that point home, while earlier renditions of the Batman Incorporated costume feature the Batstrap, like this statue, or its appearance in Arkham City, or even early artwork and covers, later books tended to gray it out or make it less prominent. And in modern stuff, whenever the Batman Incorporated suit shows up, the Batstrap is completely missing from it. By the time you hit Leviathan Strikes, it's just gone completely. I never see anyone complain about this. I've never seen a single soul even notice it before I mention it. I've actually had people argue with me on Twitter and say I was wrong about it existing in the first place. DC managed to completely psyop history and make you forget about the Bat Bulge. Which sort of reminds me of when DC showed Batman's cock and balls in Batman Damned, then claimed it was a printing error. Okay, printing error. Real funny one, DC. All jokes aside, I'm serious when I say every single nitpick I have on the superhero underwear iceberg is exemplified in the Batstrap. I think that's why I'm so passionately defensive about it. So much so that I've spent 20 minutes contextualizing it just to justify its presence here. Nearly every aspect of the superhero underwear iceberg is addressed through it. The Batstrap truly is the superhero underwear iceberg. I appreciate everyone who made it this far, and I'd also like to thank my lovely supporters on Patreon. Just a little update, I've got my next Batman video coming out soon, but if you want to see the last one, you can check out my video on the secret origin of Batman's bat symbol here. So with all that being said, thanks for watching, everybody.